So g'day and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, I'm a wildlife photographer based in Australia. For the last 12 years, I've shot with Canon and I couldn't be happier with that. However, I've got a serious knowledge gap when it comes to other brands and I want to remedy that in 2023. Now, because of the unexpected success of this channel, I am now in a very fortunate position to invest in a second system. So whilst undertaking my research, a few things really jumped out at me. The first one was the price of this Canon gear, especially the RF 100-500 lens in overseas markets outside the US. The second thing was the lack of third-party lenses for Canon. I was surprised when looking at the Sony just how many third-party lenses are available. And the third thing I want to talk about is it's just really interesting why we choose the brands that we choose. What makes us choose a specific camera over another brand? First, let's talk about the requirements I had for my second system. Now, I'm predominantly a bird photographer, so I sort of want a kit that's quite light, I'm able to handhold, has to have at least 500mm field of view, ideally a zoom, because I like to encourage myself to take wider shots and not be stuck at that prime focal length. In regards to the body, ideally I want to have at least 10 frames per second. More would be great, and it has to have bird eye AF. It's just so good, I have to have it. And I also would like some good dynamic range, ISO performance, IQ, and all that sort of thing as well. So ideally, I don't want to spend any more than 6,500 Australian, which is about 4,500 US, which is still quite a lot of money, but we should be able to get really good quality gear for that price. I narrowed it down to three very interesting cameras, and they're all quite different. The first one is the OM-1 by Olympus, which is a micro 4/3 body, which has a stunning features with stacked sensors, great autofocus. It looks like an absolute beast. The second one was the Fuji XH2S, which is an APS-C body. Again, that one has a stacked sensor. I think it's 40 frames per second. The spec wise, this camera is really, really good. And the third one was the Sony A7 Mark IV, which is a 33 megapixel full frame camera from Sony. So we know it's going to have really good image quality, but it does only have 10 frames per second. The sensor's not stacked, so it's not a purpose-built wildlife camera. So the three lenses that I was choosing from was the Olympus 100-400. I went with that over the 300 f4 prime because it was a lot cheaper and it was a zoom and it gives us that 800mm field of view. The only downside to that is we actually have quite a wide depth of field because of the 2x crop. With the Fuji, their lens looks pretty amazing to me, the Fuji 150-600 f8. I like the look of that lens, and on paper, I'd be excited to own that. And the third lens, and probably my favorite of the three, was the Sony 200-600. I've used that lens before. It's absolutely fantastic. Gives you that amazing zoom range. It's pretty fast at 6.3. It's extremely well made. It's an internal zoom, so it's not an external zoom. Just a wonderful lens. So those were the three kits that I had. So I decided to ask you, my viewers, which kit you would like. And you maybe in the comments, you could let me know which one you would have gone with. But it was overwhelming for Sony. 68% of you said Sony's the way to go, followed by Olympus and then Fuji. So which one did I choose? If you're a subscriber of this channel, you already know. I ended up going with the Sony 200-600 and the Sony A7 Mark IV. And I want to tell you why. There's three main reasons why I chose the Sony over the Fuji and the Olympus. And the first reason is the price. The price was just exceptional for what you get. The value for money was really good. So in the Black Friday sales, this entire kit was on sale for 5,100 Australian dollars, which is very cheap. So it retails in the US for about 4,500. 5,100 told me that it was an exceptionally good price. This lens cost me $2,050. In comparison, this Canon RF 100-500, this cost me 4,300 Australian dollars. So this lens was less than half the price. This is $2,000 more, which we'll get to a bit later. So price was definitely the first factor. The second factor was that the lens, now I've got a quality lens, I can have this forever and I can use any Sony body on it. So when Sony come out with, say, an APS-C body with eye tracking, the A9 III, the A2, I can always use this lens with those bodies. So this wasn't the ideal camera for me, if I'm being perfectly honest. It only gives us 10 frames per second. It does have a little bit of rolling shutter. However, it has that bird eye AF. It's quality. It is Sony, so I'm not too concerned, and I may get a different body in the future. But I've used this kit already, and the photos I'm getting are absolutely superb. You can check out that video here. And the third reason I chose this kit was probably the brand, like the brand reputation. I've used the A1, the A9 Mark II. I've used this. I'm comfortable with it. I know the autofocus works. I know the dynamic range is excellent. I know that I'm going to get quality shots with this kit. So those three factors were why I chose this Sony. So this got me wondering how other people make their choice. So I decided to do a poll, which you're free to take. There's a link in the description. So when we look at the results after quite a few people have voted, one of the most important factors for at least 55% of the people is the actual features of the body itself. So that is whether it's got IBIS, what's the autofocus like, what's the dynamic range like. And it makes sense, I suppose, because you want to get a camera that can do what you want it to do. This probably also explains why camera manufacturers are just putting as many features into these bodies as possible, even if they don't work that well. For example, the Canon R7 features 30 frames per second, which is really, really good. However, if you're shooting in the highest quality and you're taking a burst, you only get just over a second worth of shots in the buffer, which isn't ideal and would make you struggle to take photos, but it does have that feature and it may make people buy that camera. Okay, so that now leads us on to price, which as you can see was one of the important factors. And I've already referenced how expensive this Canon RF 100-500 was, but I want to delve into that a little bit deeper. So when we transitioned from EF mount and Canon, from DSLRs to the RF mount or mirrorless, we had to get new cameras and we had to get new lenses. We don't have to, you can use adapted EF lenses, but Canon are offering this beautiful RF lens, 100-500 native. This lens is stunning. I'm very, very happy with it, but it retails, I think, for around $2,900 US, which is actually quite high for a zoom lens like this. And the shock comes when we convert that into Australian dollars. At the moment, the cheapest I can find this lens in Australia is around $4,250, which is a lot of money. And this body here, this R6 Mark II, has a retail value in the US of $2,500, but the Australian price, you're not going to get this for under 4,000 Australian. Add these two together, you're looking at $8,200 for this kit. That is a lot of money, especially for someone who's just has it as a hobby. That's out of the realms of the majority of people. I know when I started, I had to purchase this 400 5.6 lens, and I think this cost me 1,200 Australian dollars, and that was a stretch at the time. I think the body, my original body, might have cost me 800 or something like that, $700. And so together I spent 2,000 a while ago, and that was hard. So I can't even imagine people spending over $8,000 to get this kit. So some of you have probably already twigged that if we look at the Sony kit and we look at the Canon kit, this one cost 5,100. It's probably 5,500 Australian, not on sale. 8,200. There's $3,000 difference between them. Is the Canon worth that extra money? Well, it really depends. I do kind of prefer shooting with Canon because I'm used to it. However, this one just offers way more value. Like, it's a no-brainer. If I didn't have either kit and money was an issue, I'd be going with the Sony every time. I can get this amazing lens and this body for 3,000 less than this. I'm choosing I'm choosing Sony every time. Now, when I look at the difference between the US price of this, which I think was $5,300 US for the body and camera. Now, if I look at the Australian price of $8,200, that's a difference of about, I think, 58% or thereabouts. So, of course, it's going to be different. You've got an exchange rate. We've got a 10% sales tax here in Australia. It's to be expected. So that's what we're at. The Sony kit is $4,500 US, and in Australian dollars, we're looking at about 5,500. That difference, I believe, is about 26% or thereabouts. So for some reason, Sony are only having a 26% difference, whereas Canon is almost 60%. It's a huge difference between them. Now, I'm not a marketing expert. I don't know why there is that difference. The fact is, the Sony is significantly cheaper than the Canon in the Australian market. And it's not just these lenses. There's a heap of other lenses and cameras where the Sony is significantly cheaper than the Canon equivalent. Now, I got curious and I wondered, is it just Australia or is there other markets that are the same? So I looked at the UK price. So I looked at the pound. I looked at the Canadian price. And I looked at the German price, the euro, just to see what the difference was. And I'll put it on the screen here. I'd love to know what it is in your market. I also thought it'd be worthwhile just to have a quick look at Nikon, Olympus, and Fuji, just to see how they look in the Australian market. And on the screen, you can see here that Canon is still has the biggest markup and Sony is the bottom, and the others sort of fit in between there. So it's interesting to see why these manufacturers charge the prices they do in overseas markets. Now, I've been pretty critical of Canon so far in regards to their prices, and it wouldn't be fair if I didn't mention that Canon create a cheaper, much more affordable line of lenses and bodies. So this here is a professional sort of a lens and a very high semi-pro body. Now, we can pick up the R7 and the RF 100-400 for about $2,000 US, and you will get amazing eye tracking. It's extremely light. This is a quality wildlife setup, and I'm not sure if any other brands can sort of offer that value. So they have this 100 to 400. Canon also have those 800 and 600 f11 lenses. This is the 800 here. Amazing lenses, and I applaud Canon for creating these. A lot of people get put off by the f11, and that's fine. However, I've used these lenses and captured some absolutely stunning shots, and it gives us Canon users, at least on RF mount, an option. So you don't have to spend the big money. You can buy this affordable gear and still be very, very happy. That brings me on to the third point that I want to talk about today, and that's the lack of third-party lenses available for Canon's RF mirrorless mount cameras like the R7, the R6. There simply aren't any. When I say third party, I'm mainly talking about Tamron and Sigma. They make lenses, or have traditionally made lenses, for Canon bodies. So we could get the Sigma 150 to 600 Contemporary, incredible lens. I've used it, taken lots of photos. The Tamron 150 to 600 G2, I've used that as well. We've had the luxury of these much more affordable third-party lenses for our EF cameras, and many people have invested in that, and many people love them. So when we changed and switched over to RF mount, of course I went looking for the Sigma or Tamron alternative, and that's where we hit a roadblock. There aren't any. You cannot get a 500 or 600mm zoom lens for the Canon RF body. Yes, you could use the EF mount with an adapter. However, as I've shown, there are some compatibility issues with EF third party on Canon. Sometimes they have some pulsing issues, sometimes it doesn't, it's variable, but some people don't want to take that risk, and ideally we want a native lens available. So at the moment, Sony is definitely leading the way. They have got so many third-party lenses. If we just go to the Sigma site and look up Sony E-mount lenses, I think they have 36 lenses available. And then you add on the Tamron lenses that are available, and if you own Sony, you have got a wide array of lenses available at a pretty good price if you don't want to pay for the Sony brand. What do we have as Canon? Zero. We don't have any third-party RF lenses, and this is why people are so upset. We used to have them on EF, so we had Canon lenses and third-party that we could choose from, and many of you did. We switched to RF, and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, we don't have them available. So as a consumer, we feel aggrieved because we've lost that range of lenses. We just simply can't get them. And we feel a little bit jealous, I guess, of Sony users that have this wide range. And I think that's why people are upset. And we're going to miss out on these really good lenses. Like Tamron and Sigma are making quality lenses. If we shoot with Canon, we can't get access to them, and that's just a real shame. In saying that, we do have a few options for Canon, and I've shot a video showing lots of different lenses that you can get for the R7. So it's also important that I mention we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So we don't know if Canon is talking to Sigma and Tamron now, licensing their lenses. We haven't had any information to suggest they are or they aren't. And that's what's frustrating, is we don't know what's going on. All we know is that Canon asked, I think Viltrox it was, to remove their RF lenses for sale. That's all we know. And I guess RF now has been out, what, 4 years? And we don't have any third-party lenses. That's where I'm at with third party. It's disappointing. It's a bit of a bummer. There are alternatives. You don't have to have third party. There's plenty of good Canon lenses. It's more just that we're missing out on the opportunity to buy those. We just don't have that where Sony users do. So I feel like I've been a bit negative towards Canon today, and I don't mean to be. I love Canon. I'm going to continue to shoot Canon. I just think they could have done this a little bit better, and I don't like seeing people upset. I read the comments, and I know a lot of you are very upset re that third-party lens situation. So I'd love to know what your opinion is in the comments. Should they have third-party lenses? Or do you think they're fine and they should just protect intellectual property and just sell Canon lenses? What makes you choose lenses? Is the pricing an issue in your country? What are your thoughts about today's video? I'd love to read it in the comments. Thanks again to all the new members that have joined up and are supporting the channel. If you're not aware, for the price of less than a cup of coffee per month, you can join the channel. You get a cool little emoji next to your name. You get access to a 2023 digital calendar for your laptop, your PC or your tablet, and 4K, really high quality images, and it helps me to continue creating content, which I love doing. So until the next video, take care. See you later.